G'day everyone, Kyle here from APT Training. Wanted to talk to you about MDG41. The new version of it's been released this week from the resource regulator in New South Wales. So MDG41, it is the guideline for fluid power safety on site for equipment that is used on mine sites or around mine sites. It covers the whole life cycle of the equipment. It's everywhere from design, manufacture, installation, maintenance, and also right through to disposal and decommissioning. So it's fairly important that this document is read and understood by all sites and should form the basis of your own fluid power management systems. The really cool thing for APT is that we were integrally involved in the review of MDG41. I was a part of the committee, and we've even got our own logo and icon from our safety course is actually in on page 41. So I thought I'd take a quick minute to talk about the 15 things that you need to know about the new version of MDG41. So there's no need to panic. It's not a huge, there's not a lot of big things that should affect you, but there's a couple of things that should be reviewed in your site management plans and also maybe in your personnel. So the first couple of things are really easy ones. There's a new definition in there around matched assemblies, and when you go further on into the document, when we look at hose assemblies, and so I'd strongly recommend that you talk with your hose suppliers about what that means for them and the hoses that are supplied to your site. The references have been updated, so there's new references for Australian standards and any guidelines, regulations, everything else that might apply to fluid power systems on a mine site. The big changes there are AS4024 has been updated in 2014. So 4024 is guideline for safety of machinery. So there's a few things in there that might affect your fluid power systems, but for the better part, the risk assessment process should be okay. 4340 and 4458 for pressure equipment, specifically around accumulators, has been updated. So this is hazard levels, and this may affect item or design registration. AS/NZS 1200 for pressure equipment again has been updated mostly to reflect that AS 4343, and ISO 4079 around rubber hose and equipment is and hose assembly, sorry. So this one, again, you probably want to talk to your hose suppliers about whether this affects the hoses they are supplying to you. I would think that they're already on board with it. The next notable, number 3 on the list is hazards associated with fluid power systems. So there's a very comprehensive list in there about what the hazards might be around fluid power systems. I would strongly recommend that you use this as a part of your site intro process to give you a list of questions that you might be able to go through and address while you're inspecting a hydraulic system. Very comprehensive list. It gives you a good outline of what they can be. Number 4 on the list is design of safety critical systems. There's a fair bit more information in there about safety critical systems, and if you've been designing systems such as brake systems, you'll already know about this stuff, and essentially it's referring back to AS4024 and all of the requirements in there. So if you're meeting the requirements of AS4024, this won't affect you all that much. The next one is protection from uncontrolled escape of fluid of pressurized liquids. Now this covers the risk of escape of fluid under pressure. So this is number 5. Now we obviously should be managing this risk through a risk-based process. Now the uncontrolled escape of high pressure fluid is a hose burst, is a fitting failure or anything like that. Now we should be managing this on a risk by risk basis. Hoses that are behind steel guards or in the belly of a machine do not pose a risk to personnel, whereas hoses that are in the driver's cab or near operators obviously do. And we should be managing those risks on a case by case basis. So your machines already should comply with this. You're probably already addressing this, and there's just a little bit more guidance notes on that in the new version. Number 6 is design for maintainability, and this for me is really, really great to see. Machines typically aren't designed and repair things or inspect them, so we need to make sure that our machines are designed so that firstly the filters can be changed. This is probably the one thing that is going to keep your system operating at its peak, but also prevent those unwanted stuck spools, system failures, relief valve failures, those sorts of things. So Maintainability of filters is really, really critical. It's amazing how many machines it's just too hard to change the filters, and if it's too hard, they won't get changed. The other thing is being able to inspect things like hoses. We've got to make sure that the hoses, the fittings, the tubing, the components can all be inspected in a reasonable fashion. If we don't make it easy for people to inspect them, they won't do it. So that's another good thing that came out of it. Number 7 on the list is isolation and energy dissipation. This is a big issue in our industry. This is a big issue in the hydraulic industry as a whole, and I've actually recently given a presentation on this for the mining engineers and a few other groups around the industry. So isolation isn't just turning the pump off. Isolation needs to start with identifying areas where there may be trapped pressure in a system. Now that can be in a cylinder with between a DCV and a cylinder, or it might be between circuits on a machine. We have to make sure that our designers firstly adequately identify all of these potential places and put in design measures to allow us to firstly identify that there's trapped pressure there, secondly dissipate it, and then confirm that that pressure is being dissipated. This isn't a hard thing. What it requires is some small changes in the design phase so that we can actually do this and prevent exposure to our operators and maintainers. There's been many incidents. We've investigated a couple of incidents where some small design tweaks at the start of the process would have prevented the incident, and some very close near calls. So isolation and energy dissipation, that's number 7. Number 8, hose assembly. Diffusion devices. We talk about hose sleeve and protector sleeve. There's a fairly detailed list of sleeves and where they should be used there. My comment on this would be that the hose sleeving, the tech sleeving on the hoses is PPE. So it's the final line of defence. We should be designing our systems around this rather than relying on hose sleeve. When we go into point number 10, so point number 10 is pressure equipment. So accumulators, there's notes now around accumulators needing design and possibly item registration on site. So the regs changed quite a few years ago around design and item registration, whether you're in New South Wales or any other states. And now there's a little more guidance in MDG41 about what needs to be covered for design and item registration. So be mindful that accumulators on your site, you should firstly have a register of all your pressure vessels on site, but secondly, you may actually need to have item registration for your pressure vessels. Moving on to point number 11, section 4 on installations is largely unchanged. There's not a lot of changes in there, and managing those installations on your site needs to still be done at a site level. Point 12, section 5 is largely unchanged. So the main thing there is that decommissioning is now included as a part of the life cycle of the equipment, and this is in line with current regulations and equipment management as a whole. So point 13, operational and emergency procedures. There's a few more considerations to take into place there. So I would review your site procedures around what these extra items are and make sure that you've covered them adequately in your site procedures. There's not a lot of changes there, but just a few little points that you might want to look out for. Now section 7, which is operation and maintenance of fluid power systems, generally is unchanged. The main point, and probably the big one that might shake up the industry, is competence. So now in the competence section there is reference to 2 nationally recognised units of competency which may meet the requirements of training for your site. Now, I wouldn't take this as we have to change everything right now. What you should do is review your current training policies and your current competencies and make sure that it falls in line with these particular nationally recognised units of competency. They are only entry-level units of competency, so there's not a huge change in the actual training requirement. It's just that we now have a national standard to apply it to. One of the units of competency is from the MEM training package and is for fitters, diesel fitters and boilermakers, and the other one is from the AUR training package, which might apply to light vehicle or heavy vehicle mechanics. I would strongly recommend that you seek advice if you're unsure about whether your system actually applies to this. There are other units of competency which are well above these units of competency, and your current staff and the training programs that you've got in place may already comply with this. So the final point is the appendices have a lot of information in them. There's some really good information on the good inspection and testing of hoses, hose routing and failure of hoses. I'd strongly recommend that you share this information with your sites, and we've actually developed some resources, some toolbox talks if you want to share this information with your guys. So there's 3 toolbox talks that are available from us if you want. So that's the key points. that you need to know in the new version of MDG41. There's 15 key points. There's a quick rundown on them. There'll be this text on the website so you can see what's going on, and if you need any information, feel free to get in touch with us.